Hey everyone. Tonight we're pulling back the heavy, moth-eaten curtain on a place gloomier than your old MySpace login, the Victorian Orphanage. And no, not the cute, storybook version where a kindly millionaire swoops in and the family dog breaks into song. I mean the real deal, the cold, echoing, cabbage-tinted institutions of Victorian Britain, where Oliver Twist might dare to ask for more and the cook would respond with a cackle. But before we settle into a straw-stuffed mattress that's seen more insects than daylight, do me a favor. Like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this chaos. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what ungodly hour it is. Now dim the lights, switch your phone to "I'm absolutely asleep" mode, and let a fan run for that soothing background hum. Try not to think about the imaginary bug crawling across your sock. Get cozy, or as cozy as you can be knowing that the average Victorian bed was basically a wrap of straw and pure existential dread. Which brings us to the big question. What was life really like for a child in a Victorian orphanage? Did they sing in angelic little choirs? Or was it more like a never-ending episode of Who Wants to Survive Until Tomorrow? Was breakfast porridge, or more of a guess the vegetable and win a single turnip ordeal? Were there playrooms, or was your main hobby dodging flying disciplinary footwear? Did kids spend all day scrubbing floors? Could you befriend a chimney sweep? Or was that just someone you bumped into while losing another tooth? Would you make a full day in cardboard shoes? Or tap out the moment the head mistress came after you brandishing a wooden spoon? Did anyone ever manage to escape? Or was the only real exit a terrible haircut and a job in a match factory? So many questions. So much dust. Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1851, right in the heart of London's industrial haze, with no parents, no prospects, and a haircut best described as functional. Good luck. You inhale the familiar perfume of damp stone, over-boiled turnip, and a faint whisper of despair. The dormitory is a long, echoing hall of narrow beds, each one identical, except for the child-shaped impression and a persistent lump that's probably a potato. Blankets if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's just your own knees for comfort and the distant hope that today's breakfast isn't last night's dinner reheated with extra steam. Let's set the scene. It's 5:30 a.m. in the year 1851. And the sun is just a rumor behind layers of fog and industrial soot. The orphanage's night air is cold enough to make your teeth ache, and your nose question its commitment to the rest of your face. You try to stretch, only to be greeted by the sharp chill of a stone floor radiating up through the bed frame and into your bones. A Victorian alarm clock with 0 snooze options. Each inhale tastes faintly of must and damp wool, like being gently suffocated by a moth-eaten sweater. Around you, there's the gentle cacophony of waking orphans, the coughers, the sneezes, the bedclothes rustlers, and that one kid who always seems to snore even after he's woken up. If you're unlucky, you're in the bed nearest the door. Prime location for catching the full blast of icy air every time the matron sweeps in to bang her spoon and announce that it's time to rise and shine, or at least rise and shiver. Now, as your brain boots up, you become aware of the textures. The beds themselves are masterpieces of Victorian discomfort. Mattresses, such as they are stuffed with straw that's been through at least 3 previous lifetimes as livestock bedding, a scarecrow, and possibly insulation in a pub. You complain about the lumps, but they're the only things breaking up the monotony of the solid wooden planks underneath. Pillows are a rare treat. Most nights, you improvise with a bowled-up shirt or whatever piece of personal property hasn't wandered off in the night. You pull your threadbare blanket closer, pretending it's a duvet, but it's mostly just a suggestion of warmth, a patchwork of former blankets sewn together by someone with strong opinions and weak eyesight. If you're especially unlucky, you'll discover that your blanket now features a brand new hole, courtesy of the local mouse, or a midnight tug-off war with the bed's previous owner. As for pajamas, forget about it. You sleep in your clothes because changing at night would mean getting even colder. And besides, you only own one set. Laundry day is a weekly event, not a nightly ritual. And there's a decent chance your socks have fused with your feet out of mutual survival. You take a sniff and decide that you two would probably want to escape the windows. If you can call a single cracked pane wedged into the far wall window, let in exactly two things: a slice of gray morning and a perpetual draft. Condensation dribbles down the glass, joining forces with the mysterious damp patches that have crept steadily along the stone floor since last spring. You step out of bed and immediately regret every life choice as your bare feet hit the ice-cold flagstones with a squelch. This is how you learn to move quickly in the morning. There's no privacy in the Victorian Orphanage dormitory, just an endless field of identical beds, each one hosting its own minor tragedies and triumphs. You catch the eye of the kid next to you, and there's a silent shared moment. We're both here. We both survived the night. It's the kind of camaraderie that can only form between people who have seen each other at their coldest, both literally and emotionally. As the matron's heavy boots thud down the hall, everyone starts the practiced ritual of bed making. Pull the blanket tight, smooth the straw, and hope she doesn't notice the new rip or that forbidden marble hidden under your pillow. There are no gold stars, only stern looks, and the ever-present risk of extra chores for untidy sleepers. Modern alarm clocks play gentle music, but here your wake-up call is the sound of a spoon on the door and the word up echoing down the corridor. Your reward for surviving another night, another day, one step closer to spring, or maybe a second helping of GRL, if fortune smiles. And as you shuffle off toward the bathroom queue, you remind yourself that no matter how cold the stone, at least you're not sleeping on the roof. Yet punchline, at least if you drop your breakfast bowl on the floor, you know it's clean. The cold and the stone have killed anything with ambition. That's Victorian hygiene for you. Brutal, efficient, and always a little bit damp. The day starts with fashion, Victorian style. Your outfit consists of a grayish tunic, practical for blending into soot, and shoes that might once have been leather, but are now more philosophy than footwear. Socks are an urban legend. If you want color, you'll have to imagine it. Let's talk wardrobe. Forget runways or Instagram influencers. In the orphanage, your uniform is designed for one thing: survival. Not survival in the glamorous, I just climbed Everest sense, but survival in the will. This protect me from the draft and the aggressive local goose sense. Your tunic, once white or maybe brown, has faded to a unique shade known in the textile world as institutional gray. The fabric is a blend of wool, hope, and the dreams of Victorian textile workers who long for the sweet release of lunchtime. Pull it on, and you immediately feel the scratch. Think sandpaper, but less forgiving. The uniform isn't tailored to your size, or anyone's size really. It's more of a community experience, cycling from one child to the next as kids grow up, grow out, or grow suspiciously sideways. If you're lucky, your tunic isn't embroidered with last year's stains or decorated with an original tear from the Great Playground Incident of '48. Your shoes, let's be generous and call them vintage. At some point in their life cycle, they might have been actual wearable shoes. Now they're more suggestion than substance. The soles flap like Victorian castanets, and every step is an exercise in optimism. If you want arch support, you'll have to get creative with straw, extra rags, or a particularly robust piece of cardboard. You tie them up with laces that are half string, half mystery material. You do not ask what it is. And then there are the accessories. Maybe a belt if you're important, or a cap if you drew the right straw. The cap's job is to keep your head warm and your dignity just barely intact. If you want something with flair, a scarf, a pin, a patch of tartan, well, that's what imagination is for. The head mistress is allergic to color. Rumor has it she breaks out in hives at the sight of red thread. As for undergarments, the less said the better. Let's just say one size fits none, and changing is a seasonal event. When laundry day comes around, the communal tub is filled with garments that should probably be classified as historical artifacts. You dunk your tunic, scrub with a brush older than you are, and hope it dries before next week's rain. Some stains are permanent. Others are promoted to decorative detail by sheer force of will. The orphanage isn't a place for self-expression, but still little acts of rebellion slip through. Maybe you stitch a tiny initial in the hem. Maybe you keep a marble in your pocket or tie your belt in a way that says, "I am here, I am surviving, and I refuse to blend in completely." It's not much, but it's enough. Of course, compared to modern clothing, the orphanage uniform is about as comfortable as sand in your bed sheets. It's the original athleisure, the athletic part being how much energy you burn scratching, shifting, and generally trying to negotiate a peace treaty between your skin and the wool. And forget fashion advice. In the orphanage, the phrase "that's so last season" means you're wearing something from the previous century. And yet the uniform serves a purpose. It makes everyone equal. Rich, poor, shy, loud. Everyone looks equally downtrodden. If you show up with shiny shoes, they'll be scuffed within the hour, either by accident or with a little help from your friends. It's the great equalizer, the badge of honor, and the shield against pitying glances from well-meaning visitors who drop by, clutch their pearls, and remark on how quaint the children look. So, as you shuffle into the day's first lineup, adjusting your tunic and double-checking that your shoe soles are still attached, remember Victorian fashion may not have been kind, but it was definitely memorable. And honestly, in a world where color is a rumor and socks are a legend, just surviving the day in sackcloth chic is an act of quiet rebellion. Punchline. In the orphanage, the true mark of status isn't a top hat or a silk ribbon. It's finding a pair of shoes that match, even if they're both left feet. Time for the morning meal, where the menu never changes. Gruel, is it oats? Is it wallpaper paste? Nobody knows, and the chef isn't telling. If you get a raisin, you're now royalty. Everyone lines up with tin bowls, and you practice gratitude because complaining only gets you a stern glance and possibly less imaginary butter. Let's set the table, such as it is. You shuffle in line behind 40 other children, clutching your battered bowl, and try not to stare too directly at the kitchen staff. They move with the weary efficiency of people who've seen too many mornings and too few new ingredients. The GRL emerges from a cauldron big enough to drown your regrets in. Ladled out with the kind of solemnity usually reserved for church sacraments or tax collection, the smell hits you first. It's distinct, a humid, steamy blend of boiled starch, hope, and last Tuesday's turnip. Steam rises in languid swirls from the pot, carrying the faintest hint of something almost but not quite nutritious. Some days you catch a whiff of onion or a fleck of something green that might be a vegetable or might just be the universe teasing you. Gruel itself is a study in ambiguity. Sometimes it's thin, barely clinging to the spoon, a kind of breakfast soup designed more for quantity than quality. Other days it's thick enough to hold a spoon upright and possibly your entire sense of self. You try not to think about consistency too much. Best not to question a system that already operates on the edge of culinary lawlessness. Now, presentation, there is none. The bowls are tin, battered, and cold with dents that tell stories of previous owners, and possibly a few that were thrown in protest. You shuffle along, your bowl outstretched, and receive a ladle full of GRL with all the ceremony of being handed a parking ticket. Sometimes, if the universe is feeling whimsical, there will be a suspicious lump, an oat, a raisin, or the legendary half-bean. That's a good omen. If you get 2 lumps, you're basically the archbishop of breakfast. Seating arrangements are what you might call communal. You squeeze onto a wooden bench, shoulders pressed between your fellow inmates. Each person examining their bowl with a resigned gaze of someone hoping for a plot twist. Conversation is minimal. Everyone knows that any sudden movement could jostle your precious spoonful overboard. And there's no such thing as a refill. You dig in. Gruel is hot at least. and it's the best thing it is going for it. You blow on each spoonful, trying to stretch the meal out for as long as possible. Eating fast means hunger comes back quicker, but eating slow means risking it going cold, which is a flavor experience no one wants twice. The soundscape is a soft symphony of scraping metal, occasional slurps, and the low groans of the eternally disappointed. For the uninitiated, GRL might seem like a punishment, but in the orphanage, it's breakfast, lunch, and if you're really unlucky, dinner. You develop a kind of Stockholm syndrome for the stuff, resenting it, then missing it when it's gone. On rare feast days, the GRL is replaced with something slightly less ambiguous, like boiled potatoes or the world's saddest sausage. Those are the days you'll remember forever. There are occasional GRL upgrades. Maybe the cook got a little wild and added extra oats. Or maybe someone donated a bag of lentils. Rumors spread quickly. Did you hear? There's molasses in the GRL today. These moments are the stuff of legend, recounted for weeks and exaggerated into folklore. I swear I saw a whole carrot in someone's bowl once. A kid will claim, and no one will contradict him. Hope is important. Modern breakfasts are full of options. Toast, cereal, scrambled eggs with avocado. In the orphanage, choice is theoretical. The only real option is whether you eat the GRL or try to barter it for someone else's crust of bread. Hint, they never trade. You might get creative, add a smuggled pinch of salt, a drop of trial, or if you're feeling bold, a bit of last night's bread crust. It's DIY fine dining with absolutely 0 stars. Punchline. At the end of the meal, you scrape your bowl clean and wonder, as you do every morning, if you just eaten breakfast, or if breakfast has eaten a little bit of you. Either way, the mystery remains unsolved, and tomorrow, you'll be back in line, clutching your tin bowl, ready to roll the dice on another thrilling round of the great GR mystery. Idle hands do the devil's work, which is why you have approximately 4 jobs before sunrise. Scrubbing floors with a brush that used to be a toothbrush, dusting of windowsills older than democracy, and fetching water from a pump that's always uphill both ways. And remember, if you can still feel your fingers, you're not working hard enough. Let's talk about your morning workout Victorian style. Forget yoga, CrossFit, or even those brisk morning walks you keep meaning to start. The orphanage believes in full body fitness achieved through endless repetitive, character-building labor. Your first assignment, scrubbing the stone floor of the main hall, which for legal reasons cannot technically be called medieval torture, but does involve kneeling on cold flagstones and wrestling with grime that's been there since Napoleon was a lad. The brush in your hand was once a proud toothbrush, now promoted well above its pay grade. The bristles are more optimistic suggestion than actual cleaning implement. You push it back and forth, watching as your breath fogs the air and the dirt mostly ignores your efforts. The water, by the way, is always cold. It arrives with a helpful note from the universe. Embrace suffering. It builds character. Once the floor sparkles, by which I mean looks slightly less like a barnyard, you're off to dust the windowsills. Each sill is caked in a layer of soot, lint, and the fossilized remains of someone's last good intentions. The rags you're issued seem to repel dust rather than collect it. Still, you persist, channeling your inner archaeologist and occasionally unearthing ancient crumbs or a button that probably belonged to a long-lost uniform. Next up, the yard. It's not enough to sweep indoors. The outdoors also require your attention. The yard is a patch of mud, gravel, and weeds, so tenacious they probably have a union. You rake, you hoe, you try not to make eye contact with the resident goose who guards its territory with all the warmth of a disgruntled headmistress. If you're especially fortunate, you'll be chosen to pick stones from the vegetable patch, an endless exercise in futility, since for every stone you remove, 3 more seem to sprout overnight. Chores are just physical. You're also enlisted in the daily campaign against disorder, making beds military tight, arranging the boots in neat rows, and folding blankets into the sort of precise rectangles that only exist in Victorian fever dreams. The matron inspects every inch, wielding her wooden spoon like a conductor's baton. Any corner out of place, and you're sent back for a full do-over, sometimes with helpful feedback like try harder, but with less crying this time. And let's not forget the water fetching expedition. The orphanage's pump is conveniently located at the far end of the property, just past the muddiest patch of earth, and a fence that always seems to snag your sleeve. You fill your bucket, marveling at its newfound ability to double in weight on the return journey. If you spill a drop, you're sent back. It's an endless relay that gives you biceps by age 10 and a lifelong suspicion of all outdoor plumbing. Then there are the kitchen chores. Peeling potatoes that look like they've survived a famine. Scrubbing pots big enough to bathe a small child, and according to legend, sometimes used for just that. And sorting beans with all the speed and enthusiasm of a snail on a winter morning. You learn quickly that complaining just earns you a new, even less desirable task, like cleaning the privy or chasing down the aforementioned goose. By midday, you've completed enough chores to qualify for a minor Victorian knighthood. But the only reward is a brief rest and maybe, if you're lucky, a crust of bread left over for breakfast. The orphanage believes deeply in the educational value of repetition. So by evening, you'll repeat half these tasks again. Just in case the building gets ideas about being comfortable, modern chores are an afterthought. Wash a dish. Maybe fold some laundry if you're feeling motivated. But in the orphanage, chores are a lifestyle, a philosophy, and a rite of passage. You bond with your fellow inmates over shared suffering and learn valuable life skills, like how to hide when the matron's looking for someone to scrub the roof gutters. Punchline: if you make it to the end of the day with clean hands and dry feet, you're probably dreaming. In the Victorian orphanage, chores are like the weather, relentless, unpredictable, and never, ever optional. Meet the head mistress, a woman with a glare so sharp it could slice bread, and a wooden spoon that's seen more action than the average Victorian soldier. She doesn't yell, she just raises an eyebrow. That's enough to make you rethink your entire life and half of next week. Her name isn't really matron. She has a full, likely hyphenated name, possibly with a title, but no one dares say it aloud. She's just a matron like a storm or a war or constipation. And just like those, she arrives without warning, reshuffles your internal organs, and leaves you wondering what just happened. She doesn't walk. She appears. 1 second, you're laughing about something probably illegal, and the next her shadow is there falling across you like a judgment from a higher power armed with orthopedic shoes. The spoon is her signature item. It's not just a utensil. It's a symbol. Some say it's been passed down from headmistress to headmistress since the reign of Queen Anne. Others say it's always the same spoon, absorbing the discipline of generations, whispering advice in the night like a twisted Harry Potter wand. Either way, it's always with her, tucked in her apron, clutched in her fist, or tapping rhythmically on door frames like a metronome of doom. You never hear her shout. That would imply she needs volume to command authority. No, matron simply exists at you until your will to rebel curls up and whimpers. Her eyebrow alone has levels. Disapproval, warning, disappointment, and the rarely seen but utterly tame, devastating. I'm not angry, just Victorian. One look, and suddenly you're scrubbing floors voluntarily, apologizing for things that happened last year, and questioning the moral integrity of your dreams. Punishment under matron is a psychological sport. You might get extra chores, which means anything from sweeping the attic with a hairbrush to folding 70 identical blankets until you achieve absolute geometric perfection. Or worse, she might simply say she's disappointed and leave you to stew in your shame like an overcooked parsnip. The spoon rarely touches skin, but oh, it taps. It taps walls, tables, stair rails. A quiet code that sends fear rippling through the orphanage like a spooky, starch-scented Morse signal. She runs the orphanage like a ship, and you're the barnacles clinging to the hull. Meals are to be eaten silently. Beds are to be made so flat that shadows get confused. Shoes are to be placed with military precision under the end of your bed. Toes aligned, heels obedient. One child once tried to hide a piece of bread under their mattress. She found it within an hour. No one knows how. Some believe she smells lies. The matron's office is a room you only enter for two reasons. You're about to be congratulated, rare or corrected, daily. It smells like ink, boiled onions, and secrets. There's a desk, a chair, and an atmosphere of such severity that even the flies behave. When you're summoned, you knock 3 times, wait for her low, terrifying enter, and step into a kind of psychological pressure cooker. She doesn't even speak right away, just looks at you, weighs your soul, then asks, "Do you know why you're here?" You always say yes. Even if you don't, still deep down, buried beneath the bun of steel gray hair and the apron ironed with military starch, there's a tiny flicker of humanity. Maybe on your birthday, you might get a second potato or a nod of approval, so subtle it could be mistaken for a sneeze. These are the moments you treasure. A whisper of kindness wrapped in decades of discipline and exactly one facial expression. Modern authority figures have handbooks, workshops, and corporate jargon. The Victorian matron has none of that. She has tradition, intimidation, and the unshakable power of routine. She is the schedule, the rules, and the law. Punchline: one day, when you're older and free, and someone asks you why you instinctively straighten chairs and feel nervous near wooden spoons, you'll just whisper one word, matron, and they'll understand. School time. The classroom is a frigid box where the blackboard is the only thing darker than the mood. Lessons include handwriting, arithmetic, and advanced techniques for pretending to understand geography while daydreaming about bread. The teacher's main tool is chalk, followed closely by disappointment. You shuffle into the room, feet dragging, eyes already glazing over in self-defense. The classroom smells faintly of damp wood, cold ink, and a lingering trace of boiled cabbage from the dining hall 2 doors down. There are no posters, no motivational quotes, no cheerful drawings of butterflies or apples, just bare walls, scratched desks, and the ever-present knowledge that someone probably cried here yesterday, and it might have been the teacher. Your desk is a wobbly plank nailed to a bench, carved with the initials of generations of equally bored children and possibly one ghost. You sit, you brace for learning, or at least for memorizing things you'll forget the second you're allowed outside again. The room itself is so cold that your breath becomes part of the morning routine, fogging up your slate as you try to write a sentence about trade routes in Burma without your fingers snapping off. Let's talk curriculum. Handwriting is first, and it's a brutal affair. You're armed with a stub of chalk, or if the budget allows, a dip pen and a bottle of ink that smells like a haunted library. You must copy your letters with military precision, slanting each one just so, lest the teacher descend upon you with the dreaded phrase again. Write too slowly again. Too fast. Again, wrote the letter G like it owes you money. Again, it's the Victorian version of a feedback loop, except instead of helpful suggestions, it's mostly size and extra pages. Next is arithmetic, or, as it's more accurately known, the slow death of hope in numerical form. You squint at problems that involve borrowing and carrying and long division while trying to remember whether 5 times 7 is 35 or the approximate age of the classroom furniture. Get it wrong, and it's back to the slate. Back to the silent stare of the instructor who seems to feed on error like a Victorian vampire of educational failure. Geography comes after, and that's where things get philosophical. You're expected to know the capital of Prussia, the major exports of Ceylon, and the location of Mesopotamia. Despite the fact you've never seen a map that wasn't hand-drawn and suspiciously out of date, most children simply stare at the globe, an enormous cracked ball that spins with all the grace of a dying top, and nod as though the swirling chaos makes perfect sense. If you're especially lucky, there's a recitation lesson, standing at the front of the room and repeating long passages of moralistic poetry or Bible verses until your tongue develops its own resentment. If you stumble, you repeat it. If you speak too softly, you repeat it louder. If you say it perfectly but blink at the wrong moment, well, you guessed it again. The teacher is a figure of mystery and melancholy, possibly once a dreamer, now an enforcer of rules with the emotional range of a biscuit. Their uniform consists of a wool coat, permanent frown lines, and the gentle scent of ink and crushed ambition. Their chalk snaps at key moments, and their sighs are so dramatic they should be scored by an orchestra. No one speaks during lessons unless called upon, and even then, most responses are a gamble. One wrong word, and you're banished to the back corner where the cold draft lives and the blackboard dust gathers like judgment. Occasionally, the matron herself peers in, and the entire room freezes mentally and physically until she vanishes back into the ether like a terrifying educational specter. Modern classrooms have tablets, bean bags, and laminated feelings charts. Victorian orphanage classrooms have silence, repetition, and just enough despair to make recess feel like a religious awakening. You might not learn how to survive in the wild, but you will learn to spell the word obedience in perfect cursive while silently questioning your place in the universe. Punchline. After hours of copying facts about the Congo River with frozen fingers and a thousand-y stare, you'll leave the classroom a little smarter, a little colder, and with a strong desire to burn every map you see for the rest of your life. Once a week, it's time to wash the uniforms. You and a dozen other kids haul buckets, wield scrub brushes, and wonder how soap can be both slippery and sharp. By the end, you're cleaner, but also soaking wet and smelling faintly of sadness and lie. Laundry day isn't a chore. It's a full body-soul restructuring event. It begins with the shrill clang of a bell and the matron shouting washing, as if you might somehow forget that your life revolves around repeatedly cleaning the same 3 items of clothing in increasingly gray water. You gather your uniform, which by now is more patched than fabric, and head toward the washing yard like prisoners trudging to a group therapy session no one volunteered for. The washroom itself is a long stone building that smells like mildew, damp wool, and a hint of despair that never quite aired out. There's no running water. That would be too modern. Instead, you fill heavy wooden buckets from a pump outside. The same pump that squeaks like a haunted accordion and spits out freezing water in uneven bursts that soak your shoes and your enthusiasm in equal measure. Once inside, you're given a washboard that looks like it's been handed down from the Neolithic period and a cake of soap so old it might qualify as a geological specimen. The soap is the color of congealed ambition and contains particles that you swear are just crushed up fingernails. It lathers only after excessive violence and smells vaguely of pine, ash, and regret. You scrub and scrub and scrub, elbow deep in water, so cold it might classify as solid. You go to war with your tunic. The uniform resists. It remembers every grass stain, every patch of spilled GRL. Every time you wiped your nose on the sleeve during arithmetic, you knead it over the washboard like you're trying to summon a demon, while the child next to you accidentally flings soap flakes into your eyes and apologizes in a whisper that says, "Please don't report me to matron." After the first rinse, it's time for wringing, an upper body workout that should qualify as a sport. You twist the fabric until your wrists scream, your shoulders burn, and your eyes water with the knowledge that you're only halfway done. There are no towels, of course. You air dry, which in Victorian England means your clothes remain damp for roughly 8 to 10 business days. Next is the drying line. A string of twine stretched across the yard and guarded by peckish crows and a breeze so icy it legally qualifies as assault. If you're tall, you can reach the line. If you're short, you jump and hope you don't land in a puddle or on someone's soap. Then comes the waiting. Children stand around watching their clothes flap like sad little flags of defeat, hoping it won't rain. It will. It always does. Inevitably, someone drops their newly cleaned uniform into the mud. This is an event, a tragedy. Everyone gasps. The victim looks down at their soiled clothes, then up at the sky, possibly contemplating whether the matron would notice if they just wore shame tomorrow instead. You offer them your spare sock, your only act of charity that week. And for one shining moment, laundry day becomes a tale of quiet rebellion and collective suffering. As the day winds down, you put your still damp clothes back on. No dryers, remember, and experience the joy of wet wool clinging to your back like a needy ghost. Your hands are raw, your fingers pruned, and you smell like soap, mildew, and the slow erosion of innocence. Modern laundry, push a button and go watch a show. Victorian laundry, it's a ritual sacrifice where the offering is your dignity. It builds character and blisters. Punchline, you did it. You survived laundry day. Your uniform may still look like it was in a bar fight with a chimney sweep, but technically it's clean. Technically, let's not look too close. Night falls, and you return to your straw-stuffed cot. The lullaby is the sound of teeth chattering and the occasional scurrying of what you hope is just a mouse. If you're lucky, you'll fall asleep before the cold gets in. If not, there's always counting cracks in the ceiling. Just try not to think about what's living inside them. The dormitory is a cavernous stone hall that traps the cold, the same way modern beds trap dust bunnies and bad decisions. The ceiling arches above like a medieval crypt, and the air hangs heavy with the scent of unwashed wool, coal smoke, and the faint tang of vinegar foot baths. Beds are lined up with military precision, each one a near identical rectangle of compromise. You have your own little space, sure, but space in this context means just enough room to lie down, roll over once, and occasionally bang your knee on the bed frame during a midnight reposition. Let's talk mattresses, if you can call them that. These are sacks of straw that have been flattened by years of orphanhood. They crunch when you lie down as though protesting their continued employment. The straw pokes through the cloth, embedding itself in your pajamas, or more accurately, your day clothes, which double as nightwear and triple as a kind of itchy, reluctant armor. The mattress is somehow always damp in one corner and suspiciously warm in another, despite there being no heating system whatsoever. There are no pillows, not real ones. Anyway, you make do with a rolled-up tunic, a stack of folded socks, if you still own more than one pair, or in dire circumstances, your own arm, which will inevitably fall asleep before you do. The lucky few might smuggle in a ragged bit of fabric, passed down like a holy relic from the last kid who aged out of the system, or more likely, ran off to join a chimney. And then there are the blankets. Thin, patchy, a quilt of disappointment sewn together by someone with a strong dislike for symmetry. You pull it over your shoulders and immediately begin negotiating terms with the night air, which blows in through the cracks in the wall like a passive-aggressive roommate. You tuck your feet, and only for the blanket to retreat toward your chest. You tuck your chest, and now your ankles are hosting an ice sculpture convention. You try to sleep. You really do, but the noises start. A cough in the next bed, a sneeze from across the room, a child whispering to their sibling about the monster in the rafters, and then the scratching. Could be mice, could be rats, could be ghosts. Best not to ask questions you don't want answered. You pull the blanket tighter, which helps until the straw beneath you shifts like a bag of angry crisps, reminding you that peace is an illusion. There's no ambient music, no white noise machine, no calming podcast, just the rhythmic drip of a leaky pipe and the occasional creak from the roof, which might be the wind or something with claws. You stare up at the ceiling beams, tracing the pattern of cracks like constellations, making up stories until you're due. Eyelids droop. If you're lucky, sleep will sneak up on you. If not, you'll be awake when the matron stomps in at dawn, spoon tapping ominously, signaling another glorious start to another nearly identical day. You might get a few hours of rest, fitful, fractured, filled with dreams of food, warmth, and other distant luxuries, but mostly it's just surviving the night, trying to stay warm, trying to stay still, trying not to flinch at every sound that suggests you're not alone. Punchline: you fall asleep eventually, not because it's comfortable, but because exhaustion finally overpowers anxiety. That and your brain just gives up. It's Victorian self-care. Collapse now, process emotions never. Bathing happens once a week, and it's a group activity. The water is cold, gray, and has mysterious floating objects, possibly a button, possibly someone's lost optimism. There's one bar of soap for everyone, which means you're sharing more than just bath water tonight. Bath night in a Victorian orphanage isn't a luxury. It's an obligation. It's not about relaxation or cleanliness. Those are merely optional side effects. It's about order, discipline, the weekly cleansing of bodies and possibly souls if you can scrub hard enough. The process begins with the hauling of water. Children drag buckets in from the pump like tiny frostbitten Sherpers. The bath water is heated over a small iron stove that sighs with disappointment as it tries to make a dent in the tub's icy contents. The result tepid at best, glacial at worst. The temperature is ideal for shocking the system and encouraging rapid personal growth via hypothermia. The tub is enormous, more trough than bath, large enough to hold several children at once, which is good because personal space is a foreign concept. You and 5 or 6 other kids are instructed to get in, an order, not a suggestion. The first few seconds are always the hardest. Your body goes rigid, your brain screams, and your toes retract in protest. But soon you're just another orphan in the soup. The water, technically liquid. It starts off clearish, but quickly transitions into a murky gray stew of soap suds, grime, and a rotating cast of mysterious debris. You spot a floating curl of hair, a thread from someone's tunic, and what looks suspiciously like a very tired raisin. You pretend not to see it. That's the rule. No one points. No one screams. You just carry on and hope the current keeps the worst of it away from your face. There's one bar of soap for everyone. It's yellowish, slippery, and the texture of regret. You pass it around like a relic. Some kids use it sparingly, others treat it like a sponge, and a few just rub it between their hands and pretend that counts. By the time it reaches you, it's been dropped twice, bidden once, don't ask, and now carries the faint aroma of peppermint and shame. You lather as best you can, using your fingernails as exfoliators and your willpower to pretend the water isn't now colder than when you got in. Scrubbing is expected, even if it accomplishes little. You're given a rag worn thin from years of service and looking more like lace than linen. You scrub your arms, your legs, your everything because matron will check. If she suspects you've skipped a crevice, it's back and you go, no matter how purple your lips are or how many teeth are audibly chattering. Eventually, you're told to get out. The floor is wet. The air is colder than betrayal, and you shuffle over to the drying area. A generous term for a single towel that's also drying 3 other kids. If you're lucky, it's still a little absorbent. If not, you air dry via shivering. Then comes the inspection. Matron makes her rounds like a general surveying the troops. She sniffs. She pokes. She lifts arms and inspects behind ears with the precision of a forensic detective. One smudge of dirt, one patch of unwashed neck, and you're back in the tub. This time with fewer illusions and far less dignity. Once dryish, you slip back into your uniform, which of course is the same one you wore earlier that day. Freshly washed skin meets well that smells like boiled despair. The feeling is a combination of cleanliness and regret with a touch of lingering soap sting in sensitive areas. Modern bathing is scented candles, privacy, and Spotify playlists. Victorian bathing is group therapy with water, and no one is healed. But for all its horror, bath night has a strange camaraderie. You emerge from the tub, as a band of slightly cleaner survivors. There's even laughter, usually at whoever sat on the soap. Punchline: you're clean technically, but you'll never forget the smell of communal bath water and the way the soap stared at you as if begging for retirement. And somehow you know it'll be back next week. So will you. The orphanage has a scent all its own. A blend of cabbage, coal, and lost dreams. Airing out the room is futile, but opening the windows is forbidden because drafts cause disease. You become nose blind, but visitors never do. This isn't just a smell. It's a presence, a thick, invisible fog that seeps into your clothes, your blankets, your very soul. The scent clings to the walls like regret, settles into the straw mattresses like a bad decision, and rises each morning with the damp, determined cheer of someone who refuses to leave. There's no escaping it. You don't breathe the air, you marinate in it. Let's deconstruct the bouquet, shall we? First, we have the dominant top note, cabbage, boiled to oblivion, and then reboiled just to make sure no flavor or dignity remains. It's not just in the kitchen. It permeates the walls. Cabbage. The floorboards. Cabbage. That one will blanket everyone avoids. Especially cabbage. It's the kind of smell that lingers in your nostrils long after the meal is over, haunting you like the ghost of under-seasoned dinners past. Next comes coal, soot, ash, and that smoky bitterness that settles in your clothes and refuses to be shaken loose. The orphanage runs on coal, and by runs we mean wheezes and limps. The fireplaces are meant to warm the rooms, but they mostly just perfume the place with the kind of aroma that makes you wonder if someone's trying to smoke out hope itself. Even the bread smells vaguely smoky. That's not an artisanal feature. That's just collateral damage. And then the elusive bass note, despair. It's hard to describe, but if you've ever sniffed a room that's been filled with damp wool, overworked children, and the vague memory of soap, you're halfway there. It's the smell of too many feet and not enough ventilation. It's sweat from hard labor, dried tears from geometry class, and the eternal musk of things that haven't been laundered since Queen Victoria was still considered new monarch. Adding to this alactory nightmare is the firm belief among the Victorian establishment that fresh air is a dangerous luxury. Opening windows a death sentence. Drafts are said to cause everything from colds to cholera to bad attitudes. As such, all ventilation is sealed shut under the principle of better a warm corpse than a breezy child. The result, a perfectly preserved ecosystem of stank, endlessly circulating and evolving like a particularly vindictive poker Monday. You try to get used to it. You really do. After a few months, your nose gives up and decides this is your life now. You go nose blind. But visitors don't. Oh no. Every time a benefactor or clergyman steps through the door, their polite smile tightens just a little. Their nostrils twitch, their eyes glaze, and you can feel them trying to breathe only through their mouth without looking like they're breathing only through their mouth. It's a Victorian masterclass in silent suffering. Sometimes you wonder what fresh air even smells like. You hear stories from older kids, whispers of lavender fields, sea breezes, the potting to Al intoxicating aroma of bread with butter. You try to remember your last whiff of anything not boiled or burnt. But your alactory memory is mostly just cabbage and coal in the back corner of the laundry room, which smells faintly of mildew and crushed rebellion. Modern homes come with air purifiers, scented candles, and HVAC systems. Your orphanage comes with a window that doesn't open, a floor that may or may not be fermenting, and a mysterious corner that has smelled like pickles for 6 straight years. No one's sure why. Punchline: you leave the orphanage one day, years later, and someone comments on a funny smell coming from your clothes. You smile deeply nostalgic and say that my friend is odor orphanage. Then you excuse yourself to cry into a bottle of freeze. There's always a cough. Someone's nose is always running. And the cure for everything is the same: bed rest and thin soup. If you're really unlucky, it's a mustard plaster and a prayer. Antibiotics haven't been invented yet, but guilt and boiled onion are in steady supply. The orphanage infirmary is not a place of healing. It's a room, a slightly warmer room if you're lucky. And only because it's been sealed so tight to keep in the health that it also traps every germ, sniffle, and we like a cursed snow globe. There are no actual medical professionals in sight. Just matron, the same spoon-wielding enforcer of laundry and moral hygiene, now doubling as the Florence Nightingale of low expectations. Getting sick is a communal affair. The cough starts with one child, usually someone named Alfred, and then spreads faster than gossip at a church bake sale. Soon the whole dormitory is wheezing in concert, creating a symphony of phlegm that echoes through the stone halls. But don't worry, help is on the way in the form of lukewarm broth and unsolicited life lessons. The infirmary bed is just a regular bed with more mildew and fewer expectations. It has an extra blanket that smells like a damp towel left in a forgotten gym bag, and a pillow that may or may not contain hay, dust, or emotional trauma. You're instructed to lie perfectly still. Avoid thinking about being sick, and accept that your only real medicine is time, or if things get truly dire, onion tea. Yes, onion tea. A marvel of Victorian medical science. The theory goes that if something tastes bad enough, it must be working. Other classics include mustard plasters, where actual mustard is smeared onto a rag and slapped onto your chest like a punishment, and vinegar foot baths that serve no discernible purpose except to make you cry. Sometimes you're given a tonic. It tastes like regret and makes your tongue tingle. What's in it? Best not to ask. There's also the occasional application of goose fat rubbed on the chest, the back, or wherever the adult in charge feels your humors are most misaligned. It doesn't cure anything, but it does make you smell like poultry. Leftovers. Add a scratchy wool scarf and the inability to breathe properly, and you're basically a walking, sneezing Christmas dinner. And yet, unless you're visibly unconscious or erupting in spots the size of goose eggs, you're still expected to help out with chores. A little fever never hurt anyone, matron says as she hands you a mop and a faint threat. So, you trudge on, coughing into your sleeve, eyes watery, and hope no one notices the growing pile of used rags under your cot. Hygiene is more a concept than a practice. If a doctor does visit, which is rare, it's like seeing a unicorn, except the unicorn is grumpy and carrying a large wooden tongue depressor. The diagnosis is always vague, a touch of something, the damp or the universal fallback, too much excitement, the prescription, rest, broth, and of course not asking questions. You learn to adapt. You share cough remedies whispered in the dead of night. You hide your best rag for blowing your nose because the communal one smells like boiled sock. You invent games like Guess Who's Dying or Cough and Seek. It's not fun, but it's something. Modern sickness involves thermometers, antibiotics, and cozy sick days with soup and television. In the orphanage, illness is a rite of passage, a shared misery, a time-honored way to bond through shared suffering and hot liquids that may or may not be actual food. Punchline. Eventually, the fever breaks, the cough fades, and you're allowed back into the regular chaos of orphan life. But the smell of boiled onions and sadness that stays with you forever. At lunch and dinner, you learn valuable lessons in economics and predatory instincts. Food is handed out in order of age, height, or the matron's mood, and seconds are strictly theoretical. Trade your bread crust for a potato. That's Wall Street level negotiation. Meals at the orphanage are not meals. They are tactical operations. You line up military-style bowls or plates in hand, trying to stand just upright enough to look disciplined, but not so perky that you're volunteered for extra chores. The queue winds down the corridor filled with the shuffling of shoes that have no soles and stomachs that have no chill. You whisper to the kid ahead of you, asking whether it's stew today or if we're back to pale mush with floaty things. No one knows. The menu isn't written anywhere. It's a roulette wheel of despair. When you finally reach the front, the serving process begins. performed by a tired adult with the grace of a forklift operator and the mercy of a tax collector. They ladle the food with the precision of someone actively trying not to make eye contact. You glance into your bowl and begin the mental checklist. Is it hot? Is it edible? Is it moving today? It's stew or something stew adjacent. A murky brown concoction with suspicious lumps, some meat, some probably root vegetable, some possibly rock. The smell is not unpleasant, but it doesn't inspire confidence either. You might find a bit of carrot if you're lucky. If you're really lucky, you don't bite into something that crunches and shouldn't. Seating is first come, first survive. You cram onto benches that groan under the weight of too many bodies and too few screws. The conversation is limited. Talking costs time, and time is the enemy of warm food. Meals cool quickly in this climate. Your stew may already be soup, and your soup may already be a popsicle. Now begins the bartering. 1 crust of bread for half a potato. 2 scoops of mush in exchange for someone's seat near the fire. A secret about matron's snoring habits for a second helping, though that last one rarely pays off. Older kids run the black market. They hoard scraps and redistribute under strictly negotiated terms. They know who's hungry, who's desperate, and who's sitting on a valuable lump of fat. That lard nugget, that's currency. That's power. Everyone learns strategy. You protect your bread by tucking it under your bowl. You eat fast, but not so fast that matron thinks you're wasting manners. You never ever leave your spoon unattended. The spoon is your lifeline, your only tool, your sword, and your salvation. Lose it, and you're reduced to sipping stew like an animal. And even they would ask for a straw. Some kids don't finish their meals. That's when the scavengers pounce. Eyes dart, hands hover. The moment the bowl is pushed even slightly away, boom. 3 forks descend like vultures on a roadside snack. It's chaotic but efficient. Evolution in action. The strongest get full. The cleverest get most of a second helping. The rest, well, they learn to love the aftertaste of jealousy. There are no seconds. Not officially. If you're still hungry, you might be able to scrape the pot once everyone else is gone, but that's a race in itself. You jog to the kitchen, bowl in hand, eyes wide, breath short. You arrive just in time to see the last smear of stew being rinsed out into the drain. Tragic. You eat your remaining crust slowly, chewing each bite like it's the last scene in a very boring but emotionally impactful drama. Modern dining, its courses, options, substitutions. The orphanage is one size fits most. It teaches you economics, strategy, and the crushing silence of being told that's all there is. Punchline. If you ever grow up and find yourself in a 5-star restaurant complaining that your meal is missing texture, just remember there was once a time when your only seasoning was desperation, and your main course was a potato that someone else licked first. Recess is a brief window of freedom. The playground has a hoop, a stick, and some gravel with dreams of becoming mud. The most popular games involve running, hiding, and not getting caught by the matron for laughing too loudly. The yard itself is less playground and more open space where accidents happen. It's a hard-packed rectangle of dirt ringed by crumbling walls, and a fence designed less to keep people out and more to keep you in. There are no slides, no swings, no soft mats. The only padding is your own underfed behind, and maybe a small tuft of moss if you fall very, very accurately. Still, this is your paradise. For 15 glorious minutes twice a day, you are free. Free to move, to breathe, to pretend the rest of the day doesn't exist. No arithmetic, no peeling potatoes, no matron breathing judgment through her nostrils like a disapproving bull. It's just you, the other kids, and whatever counts as fun in a world where toys are theoretical and joy is strictly rationed. The games are inventive. You have hoop and stick, which is exactly what it sounds like. Someone rolls a metal hoop, and everyone else chases it with sticks, joyously whacking it forward, as if trying to banish their personal demons. Then there's kick the clump, which involves kicking a mysterious lump of something, possibly old bread, possibly a sock, and seeing how far it goes before someone cries. For the thinkers in the group, there's mud philosophy, where you gather around the puddle, always the same puddle, and debate what might be lurking at the bottom. Treasure, disease, a new form of life. The possibilities are endless, and usually end in someone falling in and getting blamed for soiling the yard. And of course, the all-time classic, not getting caught. This game has no official rules, only one objective. Avoid attracting matron's attention. Laughter must be stifled to snorts. Running must be enthusiastic, but not suspicious. And whatever you do, don't look like you're having too much fun. That's a punishable offense. The matron operates on joy radar. If she senses a good time, she materializes wooden spoon in hand and reminds you that idle giggling leads to moral decay. Teen games pop up too. Tag, but with elaborate backstories involving fictional kingdoms and long-forgotten royal lineages. Hide and seek, where the best hiding spot is usually the same every day and still somehow works. A game involving rocks, which no one remembers the rules to, but everyone agrees is fun as long as nobody bleeds. Balls are a rare treasure. If someone smuggles one in, or if an older kid fashions one from rags and optimism, it becomes the center of a makeshift game that vaguely resembles football, dodgeball, or just don't let the matron see you kicking this. The ball is passed, stolen, hidden in shirts, and occasionally lost on the roof where it is mourned like a fallen comrade. Despite the desolation, there's a strange kind of magic here. Friendships are forged in gravel. Rivalries built on who runs fastest or who can leap over the puddle without falling in. Arguments erupt and fade like summer rain, usually resolved with a swift game of who can stare at the wall the longest while pretending not to be cold. Modern recesses have jungle gyms and safety inspectors. Victorian orphanage playgrounds have broken fence posts and your imagination. You build forts from twigs, swords from splinters, and kingdoms from chalk if you're lucky enough to find a nub of it rolling under the steps. Punchline. For those 15 fleeting minutes, you're not an orphan. You're a knight, a pirate, a runaway inventor. You're fast, clever, and just out of the matron's line of sight. Sure, your shoes are falling apart, and you smell like cabbage, but in that moment, you're free. And in a place like this, freedom is the rarest game of all. Every orphanage has its dreamers, the kids who plot escape. Plans range from digging under the fence with a spoon to disguising themselves as chimney sweeps. Success is rare, but the stories grow in the telling, and the legends live on. The orphanage fence looms tall. Rusted iron bars and wooden slats patched with whatever materials matron could find during her weekly glare around the yard. To outsiders, it's just a barrier. But to you, it's a prison wall, a challenge, a dream. Every time you glance at it during chores or pretend to nap during history lessons, you're not looking at the fence. You're looking at possibility. Escape planning is an art form. It starts with whispers, usually during laundry duty or under the blankets after lights out. There's always one kid, usually the wiry one with a haunted look and too much imagination, who starts it. What if they say we tie the sheets together, shimmy down the drain pipe, and bribe the milkman? The plan is ridiculous and perfect. From there, the group of co-conspirators grows. Everyone has a role. The decoy, the lookout, the rope binder. One kid even volunteers to play dead to create a diversion, though it's unclear if he fully understands what that entails. You begin collecting supplies. Spoon check. String check. Highly suspicious map drawn on the back of a math sheet. Absolutely. There are multiple escape theories. One is the spoon and tunnel method, popularized by a legendary orphan known only as Sneaky Alfie. Legend says he spent 3 months digging a tunnel beneath the coal shed only to discover it led directly into matron's pantry. He was caught mid-crawl, his face covered in beetroot jam. They say the spoon was confiscated and now hangs above her office door like a war trophy. Another method is the chimney sweep disguise. The idea is to roll yourself in soot, don a flat cap, and walk out with the actual sweeps when they visit. Sounds plausible until you realize the sweeps are usually children smaller than you, covered in soot from actual work, and they all know each other. A kid named Francis tried it once, made it all the way to the gate before sneezing himself into betrayal. Now he's banned from Peppa. Some dream bigger. The cart method. Wait for a delivery cart to arrive. Sneak in under the potatoes or laundry and hold your breath until freedom. Problem is the carts are checked now. Ever since potato incident of '84 where a child was discovered snoring under the turnips halfway to the next parish. Then there's the distraction and sprint technique. Cause a commotion, perhaps a fake fire or a well-timed argument about soup and bowl for the exit, while everyone's yelling about flames or fungus. No one's pulled this off yet, but you rehearse in your head just in case the stars align and someone knocks over the stew pot again. Even if escape fails, and it always does, the effort becomes legend. Kids talk about it for weeks. Newbies are initiated with tales of the one who almost made it. The stories grow taller every time they're told. Some say one child did escape. Lives on a farm now. Has his own pair of boots. Eats meat on weekdays. Total fantasy, but comforting. Planning your own escape. Good. It keeps the mind sharp. It gives you hope. And even if you never reach the other side of that fence, you've already claimed a tiny kind of freedom. The refusal to be fully broken. The belief that somewhere out there, beyond matron, beyond soup, beyond the eternal smell of boiled socks, life is waiting. Punchline. No one's escaped yet, but the plans keep coming. Because in a world where your meals are rationed and joy is regulated, hope is the most subversive act of all, and it usually starts with a spoon. At night, kids whisper about the haunted attic, the ghost of the head mistress's cat, and the mysterious room where the bad boys go. Are the tales true? Nobody wants to find out, but it's something to think about while trying to fall asleep on an empty stomach. The stories aren't written down anywhere. They're passed along in hushed tones between blanket fortresses and straw pillows, usually when the dormitory lights are out and matron's footsteps have faded down the hall. Every orphanage has its curriculum of fear, and yours is rich with ghostly electives. It starts with the attic. The door is always locked, the key always missing, and the stairs leading up to it groan in a way that sound a lot like guilt. Legend has it that an orphan once snuck up there years ago back when kids still wore trousers with actual buttons and was never seen again. Some say they became a ghost. Others say they became a permanent part of the building's infrastructure, now doomed to squeak every time someone opens the kitchen pantry. Either way, no one dares check. The attic breathes at night, and no one's willing to find out what it's breathing with. Then there's Mr. Whiskers, the spectral cat. He belonged to a head mistress long ago. Miss Thistlethwaite, a woman known for her devotion to strict discipline and warm milk. Legend says Mr. Whiskers died under mysterious circumstances, possibly involving a chamber pot and an unfortunate misunderstanding. Ever since, his ghost has stalked the hallways, pawless and mildly judgmental. If you hear scratching in the walls at midnight, that's him. If your sock goes missing from under your cot, Mr. Whiskers. If you get blamed for something you definitely didn't do, absolutely Mr. Whiskers. He's the perfect scapegoat and the worst roommate. But the story that haunts them all, the one that makes the younger kids shiver and the older ones pretend not to believe, is the room where the bad boys go. No one knows where it is. Some say it moves. Some claim it's in the basement behind the coal bin. Others whisper that it's a trap door under matron's office, revealed only when she utters a cursed phrase in Latin. The point is, if you mess up badly enough, steal someone's ration, sass the math teacher, or breathe too joyfully, you risk being sent there, and no one ever returns quite the same. Pale, quiet, excellent at folding laundry, but afraid of doorways. Even the more normal parts of the orphanage have their own horror stories. The third-floor hallway, always cold, even in summer, supposedly because that's where a former orphan once got trapped during a particularly aggressive game of hide and seek. Now, the draft is their eternal sigh. The mirror in the laundry room, fog from the inside, even when no one's around. It's said to show your future, but only if you're alone, and only if you're brave enough to look. Of course, adults dismiss all this. They say it's just your imagination or too much cabbage before bed. But you know better. Everyone does. Because sometimes while lying awake, you hear footsteps that aren't matrons, or a door creaking in a room that should be empty, or the unmistakable sound of a spoon tapping slowly from behind the wall. But even the fear is oddly comforting. These stories give the orphanage something it desperately lacks: mystery, adventure, wonder, even if it comes wrapped in ghost cats and phantom furniture. They're the shared currency of nighttime survival. You tell them not because you want to scare others, but because being scared together is better than being scared alone. Punchline: you never see a ghost, but maybe you hear one, or maybe you just imagined it. Either way, you pull the blanket tighter, tuck your feet in deep, and whisper a quiet warning to Mr. For Whiskers. You can have a sock. Just let me sleep. And miraculously, you do. Step out of line, and you'll discover the Victorian approach to discipline. Standing in the corner for hours, writing lines until your wrist gives out, or the dreaded no pudding for a week. Sometimes they invent new punishments just to stay sharp. Punishment isn't just about correcting behavior. It's a performance, a deeply theatrical, occasionally absurd ritual designed to impress upon your tiny orphan mind that you are not the main character in this story. You are a very replaceable footnote in someone else's lesson plan. It begins with a crime. Perhaps you whispered during handwriting. Perhaps your boots were untied in chapel. Or maybe, just maybe, you committed the unforgivable sin of sighing too loudly during boiled cabbage. Doesn't matter. Once you're spotted, it's over. The matron doesn't yell. She doesn't need to. She merely looks, and you feel your blood pressure drop to historical levels. The first tier of punishment is the corner. A classic, a timeless piece of disciplinary decor. You're placed there to think about what you've done, which is ironic because the only thing you can think about is how cold the wall is and where the time still exists. There's nothing in the corner, no distraction, just you, your guilt, and occasionally the faint scribbles of previous offenders etched into the plaster. It's the Victorian version of solitary confinement minus the subtlety. Then there's line writing. You're handed a slate or paper. If it's a fancy day, a stub of chalk or a chewed pencil, and a phrase that sounds like it was written by a disappointed philosophy professor. I must not question authority. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Silence is strength. You write it over and over and over until the sentence loses meaning. Your hand loses sensation, and you're left questioning whether freedom is even a real concept, or just a rumor spread by kids who escape in stories. One of the more soul-crushing punishments is no pudding. It doesn't sound so bad until you remember what pudding means in a Victorian orphanage. It's not just dessert. It's the event of the week. One scoop of stodgy, overcooked mystery grain soaked in the faintest whisper of molasses. Denying you, this is less about food and more about emotional warfare. You sit at the table watching others spoon in their joy while you contemplate the existential meaning of raisins. Occasionally, the punishments get creative, like the sock parade, where a child is made to carry every unmatched sock in the dormitory in a sack for an entire day. Or the spoon of shame, a wooden cooking spoon hung around your neck by a piece of twine to remind everyone that you broke the communal ladle last week and now must suffer by becoming a walking utensil PSA. Some kids are assigned extra chore detail. This includes terrifying tasks like scrubbing the matron's floor with a cloth no larger than a postage stamp, or polishing the fireplace bricks with a rag, and absolutely no clear understanding of what success looks like. It's exhausting, repetitive, and the perfect punishment because it teaches you nothing except the speed at which hope can evaporate. And then, of course, there's the dreaded public apology. You're forced to stand in front of the entire orphanage, eyes on you, silence thick, and recite a prepared statement of regret. It's humbling. It's humiliating. And it's always followed by at least 3 kids whispering traitor just loud enough for you to hear. Modern discipline might involve timeouts, behavior charts, and reflective journals. Here you're reflecting while standing barefoot in a drafty corridor holding a bucket of coal, trying to remember whether the punishment fits the crime or if matron just needed to practice her glare. Punchline. You learn very quickly. Victorian discipline is less about justice and more about creative expression. And if you're really unlucky, your punishment might become the new standard, a legacy of regret passed on to the next poor soul who dares sneeze too confidently during grammar. Occasionally, wealthy townsfolk drop by to see how the little darlings are doing. You line up, smile on command, and recite a poem about gratitude. Sometimes they bring a treat. Usually, it's just a speech about making the best of things. Charity Day is a performance, a play where you are both the cast and the set dressing. It begins early, long before the guests arrive, with an emergency sweep of the orphanage that somehow involves actual brooms and metaphorical ones, sweeping under beds, behind ears, and over any expressions of actual emotion. Matron is in rare form, stalking the halls like a general before an inspection, muttering things like elbows in, no chewing, and absolutely no spontaneous honesty. You're issued your best tunic, which is just your regular tunic, but brushed with a wet comb and buttoned all the way up so your neck itches like a wool-clad noose. If your shoes have soles, congratulations, you're wearing them today. If not, just try to walk quietly and avoid stepping on anything sharp or ironic. The younger kids are coached on their lines. Please, sir, we are ever so grateful. Yes, ma'am, we are well-fed and cheerful. No, we have never once wished to escape through the coal chute. The older kids are given more advanced responsibilities, managing the younger kids, fixing chairs with chewing gum, and pretending not to understand sarcasm. When the visitors arrive, it's showtime. Horse-drawn carriages pull up like miniature parades of gilt and seasonal furs. Out come the town's finest ladies in hats with brims wider than your bed, and gentlemen with canes they don't need and opinions they definitely didn't ask you for. They look around like tourists at a human zoo, eyes flitting from child to child, as if trying to pick their favorite Denzian cliché. You're lined up in rows, neatly, quietly, like cutlery at a charity luncheon. You smile on command, even though your cheeks are frozen and your stomach is still negotiating breakfast. One child has chosen to recite a poem, always the same one, something about thankfulness and sunshine, and how lovely it is to learn the alphabet while your socks melt onto your toes. The donors nod solemnly, as if the poem has confirmed all their suspicions about how inspiring poverty can be. Sometimes they ask questions. Do you enjoy your lessons? You nod. Do you get plenty to eat? You nod harder. Do you dream of becoming a seamstress or a chimney sweep? You say yes, because the truth I dream of owning my own spoon isn't quite as endearing. If they're feeling particularly generous, they'll leave something behind. A tin of biscuits, a box of secondhand mittens, a basket of apples that have seen better centuries. Once someone brought a mechanical toy that wound up with a key and made a noise like a dying bird. You all watched it with such intensity that it became the main entertainment for a week until it was accidentally stepped on during a heated game of kick the sock. But usually they just leave behind advice. Long, winded speeches about resilience, hope, and making the best of things delivered by people who've never had to fight a rat for the last potato. They say things like, "You children are so brave and adversity builds character," before climbing back into their warm carriages with their hot tea and their unhaunted shoes. Once they're gone, the mood shifts. Smiles fade. Shirts untuck. Someone mutters something inappropriate about one of the visitors' hats and gets smacked with a dish rag. But mostly there's silence, a kind of collective exhale from everyone involved in the charade. Punchline. Charity visits don't change much. They don't fix the draft in the walls or upgrade the soup from beige to flavorful. But they do give you one thing: proof that somehow you are the story being told at someone else's dinner party. A living, breathing tale of hardship. A lesson in gratitude. And maybe, just maybe, a leftover biscuit if you're quick. Every Sunday it's church time. The pews are hard, the sermon's endless, and the only warmth comes from pressing your knees together and wishing you'd wore more layers. The songs are uplifting, the cold less so. Church isn't optional. It's mandatory spiritual enrichment, complete with frozen toes and sermons that could double as if they didn't also include vivid threats about eternal fire. You begin the morning by lining up in the corridor dressed in your cleanest uniform, which in this context means the one that smells least like boiled cabbage and regret. The walk to church is solemn, not because of reverence, but because it's so cold your face hurts, the air bites, the wind slices. You'd think God would at least turn the breeze down a notch on a special day. But no, you trudge forward in single file, shoes flapping, socks questionable, every breath forming a cloud of visible suffering. The church itself is a grand, echoing structure made entirely of stone, poor insulation choices, and echoes. It's beautiful in a way that says, this is what guilt looks like in architecture. Stained glass windows beam rays of judgment onto your forehead. Everything smells faintly of damp wood and whatever incense was last burned during the Crimean War. You slide into a pew, wooden and unpadded, carved with holy quotes and the initials of children who came before you, likely during similar moments of spiritual despair. There is no cushion. There is no comfort. Just timber and tailbones. You fold your hands and begin the ancient ritual of keeping your knees from turning into ice cubes. It's a delicate balance of posture, prayer, and strategic shivering. The service begins. The vicar, a man who has clearly never been cold in his life, steps up to deliver what is not so much a sermon as it is a theological endurance test. His voice echoes through the church in a cadence that encourages inner reflection, or more commonly brief naps with your eyes open. You sing hymns, at least your mouth does. Your vocal cords are too numb to fully participate. The songs are about joy, light, and eternal reward, none of which seem applicable to your current condition. You clutch your book like it's a hot water bottle, which it is not. You flip through the pages pretending to look for the next song, while secretly checking how many more you'll need to endure. At some point, the sermon pivots to morality, the sins of pride, laziness, impure thoughts, and very specifically backtalk. You notice matron nodding in approval, possibly telepathically highlighting certain passages for later disciplinary use. You make a mental note never to roll your eyes again, at least not while she's watching. Then comes the kneeling portion. There is a small wooden plank for this purpose, which has the exact softness and temperature of a frozen baguette. You kneel, you pray, you try to ignore the sensation of your knees fusing with the floor in an act of divine carpentry. Eventually, the service ends. You're given a moment of peace to warm your hands over the single candle flickering at the altar. You don't know if it's holy fire, but it's definitely the highlight of your morning. You consider sinning immediately, just so you can come back next Sunday and sit closer to it. On the walk home, you reflect, not on the sermon. Mind you, you stopped absorbing words after wretched sinners, but on how miraculous it is that you still have all your toes. You might even feel a little uplifted, though it's hard to tell if that's the spirit moving through you, or just muscle spasms from prolonged sitting. Punchline: Sunday church isn't about salvation. It's about surviving frostbite in formal wear, remembering not to sneeze during scripture, and hoping heaven has pew cushions. Because if eternal bliss means sitting through another sermon in that drafty old chapel, you might just request a hotter afterlife with better seating. There's always a cat officially a Mauser, unofficially a source of comfort and rumors. Some say it's a witch in disguise. Others believe it's just very lucky to have 9 lives in a place like this. No one remembers when the cat first appeared. One day it simply was perched on a windowsill or slinking under the dining hall table like it had paid rent. It has no name, at least not one agreed upon. Some call it Whisker, others say it's Hex. A few swear its name is just Cat, which to be fair is consistent with the naming conventions of a place that refers to boiled root vegetables as dinner. The cat has a talent for turning up at the most critical of moments, right before a scolding, during secret snack swaps, or just as you're about to cry over long division. It'll blink at you slowly, curl its tail around your ankle, and remind you that somewhere in this freezing cabbage-scented fortress of rules and routine, a small being is utterly unimpressed by the whole affair. Officially, the cat is here to catch mice, which it does occasionally when the mood strikes. Mostly just observes. It watches the matron like a seasoned poker player, and if it had thumbs, it would probably write a memoir titled 9 Lives, 1 Spoon, Surviving the Orphanage with Dignity. The children treat it like royalty, not because it demands it, but because it deserves it. The cat isn't bound by the same laws you are. It doesn't wait in line for meals. It doesn't do chores. It naps where it wants, on beds, in baskets of clean laundry, sometimes even on the matron's best chair, which is arguably the bravest act ever committed within these walls. Whispers abound. Some say the cat is immortal, reborn with every generation of orphans, that it's seen every child come and go and remembers all the escape attempts, punishments, and ghost stories. A few even believe the cat is the ghost of a child who once tried to run and was reincarnated by the matron as a warning. This theory is not popular, but gains traction during particularly stormy nights. There's also the theory that the cat is a witch's familiar sent to observe and report back to some shadowy council of magical beings who find orphanages to be excellent sources of raw, emotional energy. That would explain the way it stares at you, sometimes like it's judging your soul, or, at the very least, your shoelaces. On cold nights, the cat becomes a communal heater. It makes its rounds curling up beside whoever needs it most. You don't call it over. It just knows. And when it decides you're the chosen one, you don't move. You don't breathe. Because nothing ruins a moment of feline warmth like a shift that startles it away for another 3 weeks. Even matron leaves the cat alone. She pretends to hate it, claims it's a flea-ridden menace. But you've seen her slide scraps of fish under the kitchen door. You've seen her stop and bend down for exactly 2 seconds before pretending she just dropped something. And you've seen the cat watching her with what can only be described as mutual tolerance or blackmail. You might not have toys. You might not have extra blankets, but you have this cat. And when it stretches out beside you, purrs softly, and begins kneading your leg like it's trying to awaken dormant circulation, you remember, just for a moment, what comfort feels like. Punchline: the cat doesn't belong to anyone, and yet it belongs to everyone. In a place where affection is rationed, the cat gives it freely but on its own terms. It reminds you that even in the coldest, strictest corners of but childhood, something soft, warm, and slightly judgmental can still curl up beside you and say without words, "You'll make it through this." Every child hopes to be chosen. When prospective parents visit, you do your best not to look too hungry or too wildeed. Some get picked. Most just learn to keep hoping. It's basically the Victorian version of waiting for a reply to your resume. Adoption day starts with panic. Matron announces it like a royal proclamation. "We're having visitors." The room goes silent. Every child simultaneously sits straighter, hides their worst sock, and begins mentally preparing their "please adopt me" face. It's a delicate balance between hopeful and harmless. Not too eager, not too aloof. The goal is to look like you'll be both grateful and low maintenance. Like a houseplant that occasionally sweeps floors, you're scrubbed, brushed, and buffed to a semi-human shine. Hair is parted so severely you lose peripheral vision. Clothes are inspected, smoothed, and in some cases fastened together with safety pins and blind optimism. Then you're lined up like produce at a farmer's market, just colder with more coughing. The visitors arrive, always well-dressed, always nervous, usually a couple, sometimes well-meaning, sometimes inspecting children like they're shopping for a table lamp. Occasionally, it's a widow with a very firm jaw and a clipboard. Rumors swirl about her. Some say she adopted a boy once and made him clean chimneys until he turned gray. Others say she just takes notes for the queen. The process is awkward. You try to stand still, but also look natural. You try to smile, but not so much that it seems forced. One kid always takes it too far and starts doing a little wave. Everyone else glares. It's a cutthroat game. This audition for a new life. Questions are asked. What's your name? Do you know your letters? Can you cook porridge? You answer politely, even if you've never seen a porridge pot in your life. One girl fakes a British accent despite already being British and swears she loves gardening. She's never touched a plant that wasn't part of someone's soup. Behind all the performance is that aching hope. Please let be me. Not because you don't love your friends. Not because you hate the orphanage. Okay, maybe a little. But because adoption means possibilities. Blankets that belong only to you. A chair you don't have to share. Food that doesn't arrive in a dented tin. Sometimes a child gets chosen. You watch the lucky one pack their belongings, which usually fit in a cloth sack or the pocket of a coat, 3 sizes too big. There's a mixture of joy and quiet heartbreak. You're happy for them truly, but it also chips away at something inside you. Another friend gone. Another reminder that you're still here. Other times, no one is chosen. The visitors leave with polite nods and vague comments like such lovely children, and we'll be in touch. Spoiler, they won't be. Matron claps her hands, and it's back to chores. The moment collapses like a sad soul. You untuck your shirt, exhale, and go back to being invisible, but the dreams stay. Late at night, you imagine a home with wallpaper, a family with soft voices and warm bread, a dog that lets you name it, a bed that doesn't squeak every time you breathe. You picture laughter, holidays, and someone asking how your day was just because they care. You hear stories, maybe true, maybe not, about kids who got adopted and went on to become tailor, bakers, even teachers. One is rumored to have gone to America, which feels like saying they flew to the moon and opened a bookstore. Punchline: adoption is the original lottery. The odds are long, the process is confusing, but you keep showing up every time with your hair combed and your heart on standby. Because in a place where everything is shared and temporary, hope is the only thing you get to keep just for yourself. Orphans aren't just students. They're cheap labor. From sweeping chimneys to rolling cigars, every child learns a trade. Wages go to the orphanage, but the blisters are yours to keep. You don't clock in. You just begin. One moment you're nibbling stale bread and trying to remember the difference between vowels and punishment, and the next you're handed a soot-stained brush and pointed toward a chimney with the encouraging words, "You'll fit just fine." The Victorian logic is simple. Children are small, flexible, and unlikely to unionize. That makes you perfect for every job no one else wants to do. The orphanage doesn't call it exploitation. They call it character building. You build so much character, in fact, that you're practically a construction site by age 9. Your first job might be chimney sweeping, which is basically spelunking in a black hole filled with burnt regrets. You're shoved head first into a soot-coated tunnel, armed with a brush, a candle, and a healthy sense of denial. Breathing is optional. You wriggle upward like a soot-covered worm and pray you don't get stuck. Some kids make it look easy. Others come back with hair permanently gray and eyes that say, "I've seen things." If you're not assigned to the flu, you might end up in a factory where the air smells like oil and the noise is loud enough to rattle your soul loose. Tasks include threading needles, stamping tin, or rolling cigars because nothing says childhood like nicotine exposure and finger cramps. The machines are always running. The foreman is always watching, and the lunch break is about 11 minutes long. Give or take a workplace injury. Some children are sent to workhouses where the job description is vague but exhausting. You break stones. You pick oakum, old rope, shred it apart with your fingers until you start to question whether rope is your natural enemy. The only real skill you develop is the ability to keep working while your soul quietly exits through your fingertips. Other kids are placed in where water is cold, soap is acidic, and everything smells like boiled fabric and betrayal. You scrub shirts until your knuckles bleed and hang them out in weather. Best described as punishing drizzle with notes of despair. The only thing whiter than the sheets is the absence of hope. Do you get paid? Technically, yes. The orphanage receives your wages to cover your keep. You receive the honor of continuing to breathe and possibly an extra turnip on holidays. If you're very lucky, you might get a halfpenny. Good for one stale sweet or the illusion of ownership. There's also the occasional delivery job where you're sent across town with a basket of goods and a warning. If it goes missing, so do you. You brave muddy streets, horse carts, and the odd hungry dog only to have someone slam the door in your face because they didn't order from the orphanage this week. Your day ends not with applause or a wellness bonus, but with a wash cold, dinner, GRL, and a lecture about gratitude. You lie in bed with sore arms, cracked heels, and dreams of a life where your job doesn't involve soot, splinters, or getting yelled at by someone named Mr. Grumble. Punchline. While modern children worry about screen time limits, you're out here developing black lung by age 12 and wondering if your lungs are supposed to sound like that. Victorian child labor doesn't ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? It asks how small are your hands and how long can you stand? And the answer is longer than you thought, because you have no choice. The holiday season means a few extra potatoes, maybe an orange, and a rousing rendition of God Rest You Merry. Gentlemen, that's more hungry than merry. Still, hope sneaks in like the smell of stolen plum pudding. You'd think Christmas would skip the orphanage entirely, like a sleigh that doesn't land where there's no chimney worth sweeping. But no, Christmas comes. It just arrives wearing more threadbare gloves and fewer trimmings. The matron announces it a week in advance, her tone equal parts weary and vaguely threatened by joy. There will be festivities. Contain yourselves. Preparation begins with the decorations. A paper chain made from last year's geography homework, a branch of fir someone found in the gutter, and a small wooden nativity set missing 2 wise men and half of Joseph. Someone draws a star in charcoal on the dormitory wall. It's surprisingly artistic. Matron scowls at it, then leaves it up, probably because removing it would require effort. The air feels different just slightly. The usual fog of boiled vegetables is replaced with hints of nutmeg, or maybe just coal smoke that's had a good year. Kids whisper rumors. This year there might be meat. Someone swears they saw a chicken, although it turned out to be a very plump pigeon. Still, hope resists. Christmas Eve is a highly anticipated event, mostly because the matron becomes distracted with administrative stress and can't monitor every spoon. There's a performance of sorts, recitations, a carol or two, and one child dressed as a shepherd with a mop on his head. You all sit in rows, pretending not to shiver, and watch the nativity, according to orphans, which features an improvised manger made from a laundry basket and a doll with one eye. The food, when it comes, is the real star. Dinner is elevated from nutritionally suspicious to surprisingly edible. There's gruel, but with extra seasoning, which is to say salt, mashed turnips with less resistance than usual, maybe even actual gravy. And if you're lucky, and by lucky I mean matron got a good deal of the market, there might be meat. Not a lot, a shred, a suggestion, but it counts. Then there's dessert. That mythical finale that for once isn't just bread toasted if you're lucky. On Christmas, the matron produces something resembling plum pudding. It's round. It's dark. It might be 40% raisin. You each get a slice, so small it might qualify as a suggestion of flavor, but it's the best thing you've tasted all year. If someone bites into a silver coin hidden inside tradition, they're granted good luck or possibly a cracked tooth. Either way, it's exciting. Somehow, Through all the damp and discipline, joy manages to sneak in. A real fragile kind of joy. You and your fellow orphans huddle together under your stiffest blankets, swapping stories of what Christmas might be like out there. Crackling fires, pine trees you didn't find in a ditch, gifts that are new, not rebut-toned, socks with both heels intact. You each invent a family in your head. A mother who knits, a father who carves toys, a little dog that doesn't bite. You pretend just for a night that you're not waiting to be chosen or working to survive. You pretend you're home. There might even be gifts, tiny things donated by townsfolk, an old book, a button collection, a single glove that gets enthusiastically shared between two friends on alternating Thursdays. But it's something. It's yours. And in the orphanage, ownership is the rarest luxury of all. Punchline. Christmas in the orphanage isn't lavish. It's not loud or bright or bursting with gifts. But somehow through extra potatoes and half-sung hymns, it still feels like magic. Because for one day, you're not just a mouth to feed or a chore to assign. You're a child, cold, hungry, hopeful, and unbelievably just a little bit merry. When you're old enough, it's time to leave. Some go into service, some to the factories, others just disappear into the London fog. The world outside is big, cold, and only slightly less drafty than the orphanage. There's no ceremony, no caps tossed, no speeches about future bright as coal fires. Graduation from the orphanage is less a milestone and more a logistical requirement. You've outgrown your cot. You're old enough to stir porridge without supervision. And most importantly, you're now legally someone else's problem. The day arrives quietly. Matron calls your name with all the emotion of someone reading out laundry inventory. You'll be placed, she says, which is orphanage speak, for we've found a spot for you in the great Victorian labor lottery. Sometimes it's domestic service. Sometimes it's factory work. Sometimes it's vague. He'll do well in the city, which could mean anything from shoe shining to being mildly robbed by chimney sweeps with entrepreneurial spirit. You pack your things, which is to say maybe a handkerchief, a wooden comb, a small trinket smuggled from the orphanage's lost and never returned bin. You tuck it into your coat pocket, even though the lining is mostly holes and optimism. As you walk out, you glance around one last time. The cracked plaster, the familiar smell of boiled starch and lye, the corner where you serve your fourth punishment for expressive eyebrows. Even the punishment cat gives you a final blink of indifferent respect. You almost miss it already. Outside, the air hits different. Not better, just different. It smells of soot and bread you can't afford. The city buzzes. Horses clatter. Vendors shout. There's motion everywhere, but none of it's looking for you. You're now one more face in the crowd, an ex-orphan, an adult in training, and no one hands you a manual. Your new placement is functional. If you're lucky, it's a household where you're called by your name and not just boy. If you're unlucky, it's a place where the cook throws things. Either way, you scrub floors, peel potatoes, and pretend not to hear the whispered conversations about how those orphanage children are always a bit off. If you land in a factory, welcome to 12-hour shifts, indecipherable machines, and a foreman who bellows like a foghorn in a corset. You stand on sore feet, learn to dodge steam valves, and become intimately familiar with the scent of burnt oil and mild despair. But even in the grind, you carry something with you. The quiet, gritty resilience of someone who survived Matron's eyebrow of doom, a decade of gray GRL, and bathwater so communal it counted as group therapy. You know how to stitch a seam, share a crust, and stay silent when it counts. These aren't skills that go on a resume, but they help you survive. You make friends, or at least acquaintances who don't steal your bread. You learn new rules like don't talk back to the butcher. Always nod at chimney sweeps. Never trust a milk cart that smells like gin. Slowly, awkwardly, you begin to grow into your new life. It's not comfortable, but it's yours. And every now and then, you pass by another orphanage. You see the same wide eyes and stiff collars. Maybe you nod, maybe you don't, but you remember. Punchline. There's no diploma, no parade, no assurance that you'll be okay. But you walk forward anyway, carrying every cracked spoon, every whispered bedtime myth, every cold night you didn't think you'd survive. Because graduation in a place like this isn't the end of your childhood. It's proof that you managed to have one at all. Every child writes a letter home at some point, even if there's no one to send it to. The letters pile up in a dusty drawer. Proof that hope is stubborn and ink is cheap. You're not told to write them. No one makes an assignment or sets out guidelines like include 3 things you're grateful for and 1 dream you've abandoned. But one day you sit down with a bit of paper and a stub of pencil, and the words just come. Dear Mom, it might begin. Even if you've never met her or don't remember her face. Maybe you saw a woman on the street once, hair like yours. A tilt to her jaw that made your chest hurt in a way you didn't understand. Maybe she looked back. Maybe she didn't. Either way, the idea of her lives strong enough in your imagination to fill a page. You write about what you ate, honestly or not. You describe your chores, but you make them sound lighter, funnier, almost like games. You mention school, matron, the mysterious orphanage cat. You sign the letter with too many X's, as if trying to make up for years of hugs that never happened. Some kids write letters to fathers they claim are in the Navy. Others write to imaginary aunts who live in the countryside and bake. One girl writes to the Queen every month, certain she'll eventually answer. The rest of us envy her confidence, but secretly hope she's right. There's a wooden box in the corner of the classroom, marked out box. That's where the letters go. You drop yours in with a kind of ceremony, folding it just so, whispering a silent wish that it might just this once find its way into the world. No one really knows what happens to the letters after that. Some say matron burns them. Others say she stores them in her desk drawer next to the extra spoons and the dusty bottle of cherry labeled medicinal. Occasionally, someone does get a letter back. A real one. It arrives folded in fourths, smelling faintly of lavender or pipe smoke. The entire orphanage buzzes. Everyone crowds around as the letter is read aloud. Because privacy is a luxury, even rarer than second helpings. Maybe it's from a distant cousin who only just found out about the child's existence. Maybe it's a former neighbor who took pity. Maybe it's a mistake sent to the wrong Tommy entirely. Doesn't matter. The effect is the same. For a moment, everyone believes in the mail and the possibility that the outside world might remember you exist. And so the letters continue. Some are hopeful, some angry, some ramble on about things the writer doesn't fully understand. Wars, wages, marriages. Some are just lists, things they miss, things they wish for, things they'll do when they're grown and free. All of them are honest, even when they're not true. The funny thing is, you don't need a reply. You just need the ritual, sitting with a pencil, thinking about someone, anyone on the other end, believing even for a few quiet minutes that your words could travel farther than your feet ever have. Punchline. Letters home aren't really about being read. They're about being written. They're about whispering into the void and pretending it whispers back. And in a place that often forgets you're a person with a history and a future, that act alone feels revolutionary. So you write, fold, and post your hope. One stubborn scrap of paper at a time. When the lights go out, the real orphanage comes alive. Whispers across beds, the creak of floorboards, and the faint hope that tomorrow will be better. Sleep comes slow, but eventually even the coldest night ends. Bedtime in the orphanage isn't announced so much as imposed. The candles are snuffed with all the compassion of a guillotine. Matron's voice rings out. No more talking, and the room is plunged into a chilly hush, broken only by the occasional cough and the faint sound of someone trying to hold in a sneeze. You shuffle into your straw-filled cot, which groans in protest, as if even the furniture is tired of being here. Your blanket, if you have one, is thin and always smells faintly of lye and wet mittens. It's not so much warm as it is psychologically comforting if you lie still enough. Some kids sleep curled up tight, conserving heat like squirrels in a nest. Others spread out defiantly, as if daring the cold to take them. And then the whispers begin. Little voices dart across the darkness like fireflies. Short, sharp secret. A joke passed down the row. A memory shared in code. Someone claims to have seen a ghost near the laundry room. Another insists they're going to be adopted soon by a duke with a dog and a bathtub. You don't laugh at them. You nod. Whisper back. Build the dream with them. After all, everyone needs a fantasy to warm their toes. Then comes the noises, the orchestra of orphanage night, the rhythmic creak of the floorboards as matron does her rounds, the occasional thump of a cot leg slipping into a floorboard gap, a cough that rattles like an old radiator, the soft, persistent scratching from inside the wall that everyone agrees is definitely a mouse, and definitely not the ghost of the former matron. Sometimes someone cries, not loudly, just enough that it blends into the hum of sleep and doesn't bring unwanted attention. No one mocks them. Instead, a quiet's okay might float across the room. Maybe someone reaches over to share a corner of their blanket. In the dark, kindness is less embarrassing. You stare up at the ceiling. What little of it you can see and trace the cracks you've memorized over the years. That one looks like a tree. That one might be a map. You've plotted escape routes with those cracks. Written stories in your mind where they lead to forests, castles, cities made of chocolate and blankets. As sleep circles wearily overhead, you think about tomorrow. Maybe it will snow and you'll be allowed outside. Maybe there will be leftover potatoes. Maybe you'll find a forgotten button and trade it for a boiled sweet. The bar is low, but hope clears it regularly. The cat, if it's in the mood, might pad softly across the floor and curl up beside someone's feet. It chooses its nightly companion, like royalty selecting a squire. If it chooses you, you don't move. You don't breathe. You let the warmth sink into your ankles and take it as a sign that maybe, just maybe, the universe owes you a little comfort. Eventually, your thoughts slow, the whispers fade, the creaks become fewer. The orphanage quiets into that strange stillness that only happens when 30 children are pretending not to dream. Punchline: night in the orphanage isn't peaceful, but it's honest. It's when the stiff collars come off, the brave faces dissolve, and all that's left are stories, soft voices, and the ridiculous, unshakable belief that things can still get better. Not because anyone promised you they would, but because even the coldest beds feel a little warmer when someone nearby is whispering the same wish. Every institution needs a healer, and the Victorian Orphanage is no exception. Enter the doctor, a man with a medical degree, possibly printed on the back of a biscuit tin, carrying a bag filled with tonics of mysterious color and even more mysterious smell. His solutions are simple. For coughs, a spoonful of thick brown syrup. For broken bones, a brisk walk, and character building. If you survive his cure, you're probably fine. If not, at least your fever dreams are entertaining. He doesn't visit often, just enough to remind you that modern medicine is still centuries away. You hear him before you see him, the ominous clack of a wooden cane, the wee of a man who seems to be in worse health than his patients, and the squeak of a bag that hasn't been beaned or cleaned since the reign of George III. Some say he was once a real doctor. Others claim he used to be a barber, then got confused halfway through a career change. Either way, he's here now, and he smells like turpentine and boiled licorice. The doctor examines you by staring vaguely in your direction and asking questions like, how long has it been aching and did it hurt before or after the fainting? His diagnostic tools include a crack thermometer he never actually uses, a magnifying glass for no discernible reason, and a stethoscope that looks suspiciously like it's made from shoelaces. His medical philosophy is what you might generously call Victorian minimalism. No matter your symptoms, rash, fever, missing tooth, his treatment options are the same: syrup, mustard plaster, or a cheerful suggestion that you sleep it off. His go-to remedy is a thick, dark concoction he calls Dr. Goodwin's restorative elixir. No one knows what's in it, but it smells like sadness and cinnamon. It burns going down, stains your tongue purple, and either cures your ailment or distracts you enough to forget it. If you have a cough, he'll apply a mustard plaster, a tradition where cloth soaked in spicy paste is slapped directly onto your chest like some kind of condiment exorcism. It stings, it smells, and it does absolutely nothing for your cough except make you wish you didn't have lungs. Broken fingers, wrap it in cloth. Be grateful it's not your head. Sprained ankle, walk it off, boy. Builds character. Chickenpox, try not to scratch, and maybe don't breathe so enthusiastically. If you're truly ill, delirious, sweating, whispering to the wallpaper, you'll be declared resting comfortably and tucked into a bed in the infirmary, which doubles as the storage closet for expired linens and abandoned shoes. Despite this, children do get better eventually, whether through sheer willpower, natural immunity, or fear of a second helping of the elixir. Recovery happens. And when it does, the doctor nods solemnly and mutters something about his proven techniques, then shuffles away, trailing the faint odor of camphor and triumph. Of course, some kids swear he's not a doctor at all. One boy insists he saw him playing cards behind a bakery. Another believes he's a retired magician who lost his wand and took up medicine instead. And one particularly imaginative child is convinced the doctor is actually two raccoons in a lab coat. Honestly, that would explain the handwriting. Punchline: the orphanage doctor is not a man of science. He is a man of mysterious liquids, half-remembered remedies, and questionable hygiene. But in a place where illness is a constant and comfort is rare, he's what you've got. And somehow, against all odds and logic, you survive. Because if Victorian medicine teaches you anything, it's that the human body is stubborn, strange, and occasionally improved by syrup that might just be 80% alcohol. Somewhere within the orphanage is the lost and found. A wooden box where socks go to disappear and where marbles, ribbons, and the occasional sandwich end up in eternal limbo. Retrieving your lost belongings requires negotiating with the keeper of the box, who may or may not accept bribes in the form of boiled sweets or information on who clogged the privy. Just don't expect to ever see both your gloves at the same time again. The lost and found isn't marked, illuminated, or even officially acknowledged by matron. It simply exists, wedged beneath the staircase, smelling faintly of old shoes and betrayal. It's more of a tomb for forgotten things than a helpful institution. Once your item enters, odds are it's gone forever, unless you have the bargaining skills of a seasoned diplomat or the luck of a chimney sweep who found a coin in the soot. Children approach the box with reverence and suspicion. Some claim it moves at night. Others whisper that it grows larger the more socks. You lose. Everyone agrees that if you drop something precious like a comb, a drawing, or a second mitten, you have approximately 45 seconds to retrieve it before the object is absorbed into the abyss, never to be seen again, except in dreams or flashbacks. The box is technically maintained by Gregory, a boy who has lived at the orphanage so long that some think he's part furniture. Gregory wears 3 vests year-round, knows every hiding spot in the building, and smells strongly of chalk and secrets. He has a ledger, self-made, listing all lost items by vague categories like mostly intact, wet when found, and definitely cursed. Want something back? You'll need a bargain. Not with money you have none. But Gregory accepts alternate currencies. Useful gossip, help distracting matron, or your last boiled sweet, even if it's lint-covered. If you're desperate, you can attempt to retrieve your item without his help. But beware, Gregory's rules are strict and punishment. Includes being cursed with mismatched socks for a week. Inside the box is a chaotic universe of half-lives. One shoe without its pair. a scarf that now belongs to no one, a crumpled drawing labeled to Mom in shaky pencil. There's a doll missing both arms, but smiling bravely, several forks, a belt buckle, a key to a door that no longer exists, or perhaps one that never did. Someone once found an entire sandwich fossilized into an abstract sculpture. No one asked questions. Some children use the lost and found as a shop of sorts. They lose things on purpose, wait a few days, and then find new treasures. It's the orphanage's version of retail therapy, only without receipts and with significantly more mildew. There's a sort of honor code about it. If you find something obviously personal, you return it. But if it's just interesting, well then finders, keepers, losers probably needed to keep a better grip. Even matron has items in the box. A pair of spectacles with one cracked lens. A spoon with her initials carved into the handle. Nobody knows how they got there, but Gregory refuses to give them back. He says the day matron comes to claim something will be the day the roof caves in or the cat starts talking or both. Punchline: the lost and found isn't just a place. It's a philosophy. In a world where almost nothing belongs to you, where possessions are rare and replacements rarer, the idea of getting something back feels like magic. Most things disappear forever, but every once in a while, you open the box and there it is. Your marble, your ribbon, your missing glove right next to a sandwich that's definitely older than you are. Victorian plumbing is less modern convenience, more ongoing health crisis. The orphanage privy sits in the farthest, coldest corner of the yard, guarded by spiders large enough to demand rent. The aroma is legendary. At night, visiting the privy is a rite of passage. Will you brave the chill and the ghost stories, or risk bladder mutiny? Either way, you'll come back changed, and probably with a tale no one wants to hear at breakfast. The privy, affectionately nicknamed the Pit of Despair, is not so much a bathroom as it is a challenge issued by the universe. Getting there involved a trek through the frostbitten yard, past the laundry line of frozen trousers, and across what can only be described as a mud zone that never dries. In winter, the ground crunches underfoot. In summer, it squelches. You mustn't think too hard about what causes the squelching. Built entirely of damp wood and disappointment, the privy leans slightly to the left, threatening to tip entirely in a strong wind or a particularly enthusiastic sneeze. The door doesn't close unless you wedge it with a stick or your dignity. Inside, there's a wooden bench with a hole cut out, a stack of old newspapers pretending to be toilet paper, and an air quality that would make a coal mine seem refreshing. The smell indescribable. Some say it's a mix of cabbage, damp hay, and despair. Others claim it has no smell, just a feeling, like a warning from the gods. Flies dance in a slow, mocking circle. You hold your breath. You try not to touch anything. You contemplate the choices that led you here. The younger children avoid it entirely. They try to hold it, cross their legs, whisper desperate prayers to the plumbing gods, but eventually all must face the reckoning. The bravest among you volunteer to escort the timid, though escort usually just means standing a few paces away and whispering, "Hurry up." At night, it becomes even worse. The darkness wraps around the yard like a wool blanket soaked in menace. The lantern you carry barely lights the path, and the stories begin to whisper in your mind. Ghosts of children who fell in and were never seen again. Rats the size of bread loaves. One kid swears he saw the matron emerging from the privy at midnight in a cloak, muttering to herself and feeding something down the hole. Some nights you decide it's not worth it. You try to wait. You perform elaborate mental tricks to distract your bladder. You bargain with yourself. You remember the last time you wet the bed and the icy morning that followed. Eventually, the choice is made for you. The privy wins. There's also the issue of cleaning the privy, which is a punishment usually reserved for crimes against humanity or speaking out of turn during matron's weekly announcement. Armed with a bucket, a stick, and a scarf tied tightly over your nose, you enter the realm of biohazard. No one speaks of what they find in there. No one ever cleans it entirely. It is not cleaned, merely temporarily subdued. And yet, for all its horrors, the privy becomes a strange, bonding experience. Survivors return with wild eyes and exaggerated tales. Some claim they saw the meaning of life scratched into the wooden walls. Others swear they heard the orphanage cat whisper, "Run, punchline." In a world without plumbing, luxury, or warm feet, the privy stands as a monument to your endurance. It humbles you. It haunts you. It teaches you to fear nothing. Because if you've conquered the orphanage privy on a windy night in February, you can probably survive anything. Even matron, even boiled turnips, even life itself. In a world ruled by order and silence, the real treasure is friendship. Orphans form secret societies dedicated to the pursuit of fun and the smuggling of contraband biscuits. Code words are exchanged behind the matron's back, and forbidden pacts are sealed with pinky swears and stolen buttons. These alliances can make the difference between a miserable week and a slightly less miserable week, provided nobody snitches. Friendship at the orphanage is a delicate operation, equal parts loyalty, stealth, and shared trauma over laundry day. Out in the open, you're just another face in a sea of scrubbed ears and identical tunics. But underneath that rigid surface, an invisible network of whispered names, exchanged glances, and coded nods keeps things running. It's not just camaraderie, it's resistance. A biscuit smuggled is a protest. A whispered joke in the middle of chores is an act of rebellion. The best friendships are born in adversity. Maybe it started when someone slipped you a crust of bread on your first day, or when you were caught crying after matron spoon lecture, and someone handed you a tissue made from a sock. Bonds are formed quickly and deeply because there's no time to be picky when your main emotional support options are Gregory the Lost and Found Goblin, or the cat that only shows up when you don't want it to. Your alliances form around the beds at night, beneath the laundry lines, or under the back stairs where matron never looks because of the draft. There are no names for your group. Naming would give it away. But you know who your people are. The ones who will keep lookout while you sneak a sip from the secret stash of sweetened tea. The ones who will trade you their pudding for your last piece of chalk. No questions asked. You invent elaborate communication systems, tapping codes on bunk rails, messages written in soap on the back window. One group developed a fully functional cipher using crumbs and button placement. Matron never caught on. She just thought the crumbs meant someone was being cheeky with the biscuits. Again, contraband is the lifeblood of these alliances, not weapons or riches, though a full bar of soap might qualify as both. But the real treasures, sweets, snippets of newspaper, comics, and broken bits of mirror. If someone scores a peppermint, it gets broken into pieces so small you need tweezers and faith to hold them. If someone finds an orange peel, congratulations. You now possess the orphanage's most valuable currency, smell. Sometimes the alliances go even further into the territory of secret missions. Missions to sneak into the kitchen at dawn and liberate the good bread before it becomes the bad toast. Missions to rescue a doll from the punishment shelf. Missions to find out what happened to little Annie after she got caught using the good embroidery thread for a puppet. Of course, not everyone is trustworthy. The orphanage has its informants. Kids who trade secrets for scraps, praise, or the chance to avoid their next punishment. You learn quickly who can be trusted with a cookie crumb and who will hand you over for half a crust. Still, the risk is worth it because having someone to laugh with during silent mending hour, someone to share your single boiled sweet with, or just someone to sit next to when everything feels unfair, that's the kind of wealth no Victorian orphanage can confiscate. Punchline. In a place built on rules and rations, friendship is your greatest rebellion. It's the one thing they can't issue, punish, or ration out. It grows in corners, behind backs, and under blankets. And in a world where even your socks are shared and your name is half forgotten, being someone's secret best friend is the closest thing you'll find to freedom. So tonight, as you drift off tucked under clean sheets with a pillow that doesn't crunch or crawl. Maybe spare a thought for the thousands of children who brave the long, chilly nights of Victorian orphanages. Their days were filled with hard edges, hunger, chores, chilly, drafty halls, and more mysterious puddings than anyone should legally endure. And yet somehow laughter found its way into even the dustiest corners. Stories were whispered across beds. Secret friendships bloomed over shared crusts of bread. And hope stubbornly survived in the oddest places, even in a pair of hand-me-down shoes 3 sizes too large. Yes, Victorian orphanage life was rough. Shoes with holes, baths with strangers, punishments for breathing too loudly, and dinners that doubled as chemistry experiments. The odds were stacked high, but so was the resilience of the kids who call these places home. They found ways to imagine, to dream, and sometimes to escape, if only for a moment, in stories told by candlelight. So the next time you grumble about slow Wi-Fi, grocery stores out of oat milk, or a coworker who microwaves fish, remember the orphans who faced much worse, and kept going if they could face another day in woolen sackcloth and cold cabbage stew. You can probably handle whatever minor 21st century inconvenience is lurking in your inbox. Let their stubbornness remind you that even in the darkest places, humans find ways to look out for each other, to laugh, to hope, and to survive. History is full of misery, yes, but also of grit, kindness, and the most unlikely kinds of joy. So, rest easy tonight. You're safe, warm, and statistically speaking, extremely unlikely to be woken up by a matron with a wooden spoon. May your dreams be filled with good food, warm beds, and the comforting knowledge that you do, in fact, live in the future. Sleep well and good night.